I knew something was wrong the second I stepped outside and saw the empty space where my truck should have been. 6 a.m., the sky still gray, a thin mist on the asphalt, and in the middle of it, a scatter of broken taillight glass glinting red like confetti after a war. My heart dropped. That spot wasn't just where I parked, it was mine, deeded to my property. My name printed right there on the condo plan. I paid for it, I paid the taxes, the dues. But somehow someone decided they knew better. And that someone was Karen, the HOA president, with a smile sharp enough to slice glass. She'd been watching me for weeks. You could feel it. Her judgment followed me every time I pulled into the lot. My old pickup stood out among all the polished SUVs and spotless sedans. It wasn't broken down, just old, reliable. The kind of truck that's seen years of hard work and still runs strong. But to Karen, it didn't fit the neighborhood aesthetic. Those were her exact words printed in bold on a bright orange notice taped right on my windshield one Friday evening. Violation unauthorized vehicle. I actually laughed when I first saw it. I thought it was a mistake, maybe some overzealous board rule about washing cars too close to the curb. By sunrise, my laughter died. My truck was gone. No note, no warning, just gone. I called the towing company and the guy on the phone said, "Almost bored." Yeah, HOA called it in. Abandoned vehicle. Abandoned. I drove it 12 hours earlier. My blood boiled. I stormed over to Karen's unit and knocked until she opened the door. She stood there neat as a doll, her hair perfect clipboard tucked under her arm like a badge of authority. "Rules are rules," she said calmly when I demanded an explanation. Then she tried to close the door in my face. I caught it with my foot. "That spot is deeded to my condo," I told her, voice shaking. "You had no right to touch my property." She shrugged like I was some kid throwing a tantrum. "Not if it lowers our property values." That was it. That's all she said before shutting the door. And for a moment, I just stood there furious, humiliated, powerless. My neighbors peeked through their blinds, watching, pretending they didn't see anything. That's how it always was around here. Karen spoke and everyone nodded. I went to the next HOA meeting armed with my deed, the condo plan proof that space was mine. 5 board members sat at the table, faces blank, Karen at the head like a queen. I handed over my papers. "This," I said, "is my legal property. You can't tow from it." She barely glanced at the page. "This is a community matter," she said, "and we voted on stricter appearance standards." I asked to see the vote record. She smiled. "You'll receive an update in the newsletter." I walked out, shaking my neighbors, staring at the floor like they were afraid to breathe. I paid hundreds to get my truck back because I had to get to work. The towing guy smirked when he swiped my card, and I noticed the business name on the receipt, something familiar. But I didn't connect it yet. I just drove home, angry, embarrassed, done with being polite. That night I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by paperwork, my deed, the HOA bylaws, maps, emails. I read every line, every boring clause, and there it was. Clear as day, the HOA board cannot regulate or restrict a deeded parking space without a vote of all owners. There was no vote. They broke their own rule. I typed the name of the towing company into the state business registry. My heart kicked up a beat when I saw the owner's name, same last name as Karen. Her brother. She'd literally ordered her brother's company to tow my truck from my own property. That was the moment something inside me flipped. I wasn't just mad anymore. I was focused, calm, determined. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to stoop to her level. I was going to be precise, legal, surgical. The next morning I filed a police report for an unlawful tow. The officer barely looked up until I slid my deed across his desk. He raised his eyebrows, muttered, "That's interesting," and typed a little faster. Step 1 done. Step 2. I drafted a certified letter addressed to the entire HOA board and the property manager. I attached copies of the deed, the bylaw page, and the business filing that proved the family tie. The letter was simple: return my towing fees and issue a written apology within 72 hours, or I file in small claims court and report the board to the state HOA Oversight Office. Step 3. I printed flyers, plain black and white, no drama. Know your deed rights. Unlawful towing is a civil violation. I listed the exact statute number, the link to a free legal aid clinic, and pinned them on the community board near the mailboxes. By day 2, I caught Karen ripping them down. She spun around when she saw me. "This is slander," she hissed. "No," I said, pulling out my phone. "This is truth." I filmed her crumpling the papers and throwing them away. Neighbors stopped to watch. A few laughed. Someone whispered, "Is that about the truck?" By the end of the day, everyone knew. The quiet little neighborhood suddenly buzzed with whispers. For the first time, Karen's word wasn't gospel anymore. People started asking me for copies of the bylaws. They wanted to read the rules for themselves. On day 3, the property manager finally emailed, "Let's discuss this matter." I replied, "Sure." Public meeting. At the clubhouse. When I walked in, half the neighborhood was already there. Phones out, cameras ready. Karen sat in front, dressed like she was hosting a talk show, a stack of papers in front of her. She greeted me with that same condescending smile. "Let's keep this civil," she said sweetly. I set my folder on the table, opened it slow. "You towed my truck from a deeded spot." I said, my voice calm but firm. "You authorized it personally, and your brother's company profited from it. That's a conflict of interest and a violation of HOA policy." A low murmur spread through the room. Karen's smile twitched. "We did nothing wrong," she said. "This meeting is adjourned." She reached for her gavel. Yes, she actually had one, but before she could strike it, the door opened. In walked the city inspector and the same police officer I'd spoken to earlier. Every phone in the room tilted toward them. The inspector held up a tablet with photos of the damaged storm drain next to my parking space. "We trace this to the tow incident," he said. "The truck was pulled at the wrong angle, caused structural damage to public property." "Who authorized this tow?" Karen froze. You could almost hear her brain scrambling for an excuse. She glanced at the property manager, who lifted her hands and said quickly, "Not me. I have no record of any authorization." All eyes turned back to Karen. She fumbled through her clipboard and finally produced a crumpled form with her own signature at the bottom. The inspector took it, scanned it, then looked at me. "This is your deeded spot." "Yes." He turned back to the board. "Then this was unlawful. You can't tow from a deeded space without consent. And you've damaged city infrastructure in the process." Gasps filled the room. Someone in the back actually clapped. Karen's face went from red to white in seconds. She muttered something about protecting standards, but no one was listening. The officer stepped forward, asked her a few questions, took statements. The inspector handed her a violation notice. The property manager scribbled notes like her pen was on fire. 2 weeks later, I was in small claims court. Karen showed up with a lawyer. I didn't have one. I didn't need one. I had facts. I had the deed, the bylaw, the video of her tearing down my flyers, and the business record showing her brother's involvement. The judge looked exhausted, like he'd seen too many HOA disputes in his career. He rubbed his forehead and asked just 2 questions. "Is this the deed to the parking space?" I said yes. "Was there a vote authorizing any enforcement over deeded spaces?" I said no. He leaned back, sighed, then spoke clearly for everyone to hear. "The HOA acted beyond its authority. I'm ordering them to reimburse all towing and court costs and pay damages for improper enforcement. Any conflict of interest between the HOA and the towing company must cease immediately." The gavel hit the desk like a thunderclap. Karen didn't even look at me as she gathered her papers, but I heard someone whisper behind me, "Finally." A week later, I got a check in the mail from the HOA and a formal letter acknowledging that my parking space was exclusive use property. They said it like they'd just discovered fire. The towing company lost their contract. The broken storm drain got repaired. And at the next meeting, Karen resigned to focus on her family. The room was silent except for one guy who muttered, "Sure she did." Now when I park my truck, I back in slow, real slow, just for the drama. No orange stickers, no tight smiles, just peace. Neighbors wave. They chat about the weather recipes, little things, the way a community should be. Sometimes in the evening when the sun hits the fresh paint lines on that parking space, I think about that moment in court, the judge's face when he realized how absurd it all was. That look made every long night, every email, every shaky moment of doubt worth it. Because revenge doesn't need to be loud, it just needs to be right.